This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I am the spectacularly happy Evan Grant.
From Doug Melvin to Mark McLemore to Jerry Naron, just last week we've been discussing the 1996 Rangers a lot this year as we prepare to honor them for their 30th anniversary as the first team in franchise history to go to postseason later this year. And we'll do it again today.
Yes, and John, for stealing my line, I will just remind everybody that that was the first team in franchise history dating back to not just 1972 when the team came to Arlington, but from the establishment of the second edition of the Washington Senators in 1961 to reach the postseason. It had been almost 50 years.
No, it was 35, Evan, but that's okay.
It had been almost 35 years.
It was 36. It was the 36th year in franchise history that they went to the postseason.
It just seemed like 50 years, John.
And that 1996 team really, it didn't start in 1996. I think it goes back to the ownership change in March of 1989 when Eddie Childs sold the team to a group that was fronted by Rusty Rose and the future 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush. And our guest today had a big role in that, Tom Schieffer.
One of the investors, as John just stole my line again, was Tom Schieffer, a Fort Worth attorney who also served as a state representative in the 1970s.
And Schieffer was later ran the charge to build a new ballpark in Arlington, was the club president for about 8 or 9 years during the time leading up to that first postseason appearance in 1996. And we'll continue with the story here with Tom in just a minute.
Bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. Here comes Jimmy Dale from Baker Brothers Plumbing, AC, and Electrical.
Thanks, Chuck. When your home pitches curveballs, Baker Brothers knocks it out of the park.
Home run, Baker Brothers. Incredible.
As the official home service partner of your Texas Rangers, we're offering $300 off a tank or tankless water heater.
Another winning call. Visit callbakernow.com or dial 214-342-1171 today.
Baker Brothers.
Great service.
Well, we're very happy on this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers to have Tom Schieffer as our guest. Tom has had a very interesting and renowned career in several areas. He was in the Texas legislature in his 20s for 3 terms. Later on in his career, he was the ambassador to both Australia and Japan in the George W. Bush administration for 4 years each. A very well-known lawyer in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, still makes his home there. But today we're going to talk about, I think, something that Tom probably never expected when he was younger, and it really probably changed his life, and that's his role in baseball. And Tom, we're happy to have you today, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. I'm really happy to be here.
So we're talking a lot this year about 1996. It's the 30th anniversary. And I think Evan and I both agree that didn't start in 1996, that the Rangers finally won their first American League West Division title. It started way back in last part of 98 and then in early 1989 when the group, fronted by Rusty Rose and George W. Bush, and you were a limited partner, purchased the team from Eddie Childs. And been working with the team in those days, I know where we were in those last few years of the Eddie Childs era. Eddie didn't have a lot of money. The team almost moved to the Tampa Bay area at one point. The last thing he did do, which was change the course of the franchise, was sign Nolan Ryan. But looking back to those days, talk a little bit first about how you got involved in that group.
I was a late arrival to it. I had actually been involved with some other people that were trying to buy the team too, but George Bush got a letter of intent to sell the team from Eddie Childs to sell the team to him and to a group that he was putting together. And so he called me and asked me if I wanted to be part of that group. And because he already had the letter of intent, I assumed that he was going to try to mark it up and try to recover some of the initial money. And he said, well, if you can come into it on the same basis as everybody else, would you be interested? And Richard Rainwater was a friend of mine, and I knew Richard was in the group already. And I said, you mean I could come in on the same basis that Richard is in? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I might be interested in that. And of course, I went out that afternoon and met him for the first time. And the thing that I think people forget is that I didn't know George Bush. George Bush didn't know me. I didn't know Rusty Rose. Rusty Rose didn't know me, didn't know George. And so there were the three of us that basically wound up running the franchise. And it changed my whole life. I wouldn't be probably talking to you today if it hadn't been for that. And I certainly wouldn't have been an ambassador of the United States. So it was just kind of one of those life-changing moments. And I'm really glad it happened.
So talking about that, what would you say, and this is maybe when you guys came in, and again, you weren't directly involved at the beginning, but President Bush, I mean, was a great ambassador. He was the best front guy, and just spokesman for the team that a team in that situation could ever have. But what was the vision, you think, of that ownership group when they bought the team? What did they want to accomplish?
Well, number one, his uncle had been a minority member of the Mets when the franchise was reestablished, and his father had been the captain of the Yale baseball team that appeared in the first College World Series. So he just was in love with baseball, and he had grown up. He was in Midland a long time, but he also went to Houston. And Judge Huffines was the guy that had an apartment inside the Astrodome at the time, but he just loved baseball. And the odd thing about the situation was when I talked to him that very first day, I said, before this goes any further, when you go to check me out, I'm not going to check out, because it was 1988 when his father was elected president, and Lloyd Benson was on the ticket with Michael Dukakis, and I had been very active in that campaign on Senator Benson's side. And he said, oh, that doesn't make any difference. He said, we're not trying to put together a Democratic team or a Republican team. We're trying to put together a baseball team. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you want to be in it, you can be in it. And so that, again, was one of those turning points. But the franchise itself, I think there were 26 teams at that point in time. And the franchise, the Rangers, I think were 24th or 25th in revenue. I mean, they were really bottom dwellers at that point in time. And they'd had some good teams. They had some great players. I mean, Fergie Jenkins, Jim Bibby. I mean, they were good. But they just couldn't get there. And what we saw in the franchise was the value of getting new ownership and building a new ballpark. I mean, you just couldn't get the revenues out of Arlington Stadium. It was a very fun place to go to a ball game and all that, but it just didn't produce major league revenues. And so we saw that as an opportunity, and it happened. And we opened the new ballpark in '94. And it was a huge success. And to tell you about the scale of the impact on the revenue, I think when we bought the team, it was about $30 million. And by 1993, the last year that we were in the old ballpark, we had doubled that to $60 million. And then when we moved into the new ballpark, we more than doubled it again. And I think we had revenues of $127 million. But when you had revenues that large, then you could compete with the big market teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers and stuff like that. So it was a sea change in the ability of the Rangers to be competitive on the field, and it was a lot of fun.
When you guys came in, it was clear that you needed a new ballpark to compete. But how far along were you in the idea stage there of what needed to happen?
Well, we had 147 acres there. And that was because Eddie Childs, the city of Arlington had allowed him to acquire that. And so that was a good starting point. But we went around, there were 5 different cities that we approached. And we basically told Arlington, if you can make this work, you're our first choice. And Richard Green and Tommy Vandergrift, they really had their hearts in it. And Tommy Vandergrift, of course, had been the principal that had gotten the franchise to Texas to begin with. And I knew him from my days in the legislature. I did not know Richard Green at that point in time, but they wanted to help. And we went around and we asked various cities. And I remember going to Mayor Bolin in Fort Worth, who was the mayor at the time, and asking him if Fort Worth was interested. He said, no, it really should go to Arlington because Tommy Vandergrift was the one that was responsible for getting it here. But I went to see Annette Strauss in Dallas, and I went to see people in a couple other cities too. But Arlington really was more prepared than everybody else was. They were more prepared to show you how to do it and how it could work and all that. And it was a dream partnership. And I think that the citizens of Arlington should be very proud of what happened with the ballpark, because we had an election for the half-cent sales tax to dedicate to the building of the ballpark. 65% of the people in Arlington approved that. That never happened anywhere else.
And if my recollection is we had more people vote in Arlington in that election than in the midterms in November of 1990. It was amazing.
More people voted in that election than voted in the Democratic and Republican primaries combined.
Wow.
And it was really a community endorsement of the idea. And I think we are all eternally grateful to the citizens of Arlington for making that decision.
So, people do talk about the 96 team, and we talk about the presence of Will Clark, and we talk about the pitching depth and all of that. And certainly the Nolan Ryan had brought this club prior to that a level of legitimacy. But I mean, you could always make the argument that the 96 team was built largely on the back of the stadium and the ability to get that stadium built.
If we hadn't have built the ballpark, we couldn't have had the revenue to put the kind of team on the field that we did. And it just changed everything. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but to me, it was when the ballpark opened, Major League Baseball had finally arrived. And
no doubt about it.
It just made the difference in everything, and the way that we were perceived in the marketplace, the way that the fans responded to it. I mean, we drew almost 3 million people that first year, and but for the strike, we would have done it. But it still is a source of pride for me at how much it changed the community. And how much it was appreciated, and what a good partnership we had with the city. We never had any dispute with the city after that, and we were partners together, and that always makes a big difference when you're trying to do something with somebody else.
Well, and I think that precedent, this is a little bit of conjecture, but I think that precedent probably set the stage for the new stadium getting built in the way that it did, or getting approved in the way that it did, because I think, and this is. It's a conversation John and I have had. I think you and I have had it on occasion. I still am a big believer that if you were trying to draw the biggest fan base, that at least this newest version, Globe Life Field, should probably be in Dallas, and to capitalize on that population center and the corporate community. But Arlington has always been such a willing partner that it was impossible to ignore that opportunity.
Well, and people in Dallas make that argument that Dallas is the principal city, but Fort Worth is now the 10th largest city in America, and it's over 1 million people. Arlington is now a city of 450,000, and what was unique to our franchise was it's the Texas Rangers. It's not the Dallas Rangers. It's not the Fort Worth Rangers or the Arlington Rangers, because it's the metropolitan area. And right now, the metropolitan area in Dallas-Fort Worth is about 8.5 million. In Houston, it's about 7.5 million. But if you just said, well, it's all Dallas, you're going to cut yourself out of the rest of the market in a way that you don't want to do.
Well, let's talk for just a second before we get to the 96 and all that directly about 1994 and the strike and the impact that it had on the franchise and on baseball. And baseball is coming up again to the end of the expiration of another CBA on December 1st, and you hear all the talk. What do you remember about that? Because I mean, I know it was so devastating for us. We had all that momentum going in, and with that, the replacement players and the momentum. And again, 1996 had a lot to do with us being able to get that momentum back. But just go back a couple of years, because you were right in the middle of that, and it was hard.
It was a killer. And don't forget, Kenny Rogers had thrown a perfect game right before play was suspended. But you could see it coming, you could feel it, and there were people on both sides that were determined to just drive it to the wall. And it was not productive for baseball. And I think in fairness to the players, when the owners had the hammer, they used it with enormous consequences. And then when the players got the momentum, they used it. And so what we have to do is find some way in baseball to find a medium where both players and owners can conduct their business in a business-like way that is not ruining the game. And I fear that if we go through another strike like we did in 1994 into the 95 season, it could be disastrous for baseball. And that would be a shame. Baseball is still the best game that has ever been invented. And it's the only game that you can compare people who played in one era with people who play in the present era. And it's a fair comparison. You can't do that in basketball. You certainly can't do it in football. I think it's something we don't want to fool with.
So, Tom, I don't think you're quite as obviously not having the same conversations that you had in '94 as part of the ownership group. But from your perspective, are you hearing and feeling from what you read, see, you feeling the same? So you get the same kind of feeling of the '94 season?
I don't, because I don't follow it as closely as I did then. And I don't have the interaction with the other owners that I did back then. But it is a thing to fear, because it's a long strike is not going to be helpful to anybody, and we have to figure out some way that the two sides can get along for the good of the game. And I say that not for one side or the other, but this is a great game. It has been for so many years, for so many decades, and to take a chance with it, you just don't want to do it. And surely minds can meet somewhere where it's fair to both sides.
Well, you would like to hope so. The problem we always run into is that both sides dig in very, very deeply and don't seem to be willing to make a move until the last minute or after the last minute.
Well, that's the nature of deals. I mean, nobody ever makes a deal until the other guy gets ready, just stands up and says, "That's it for me, I'm walking out." And then the deal is made. But this is too serious, and it has too big of consequences on the game itself. And that game has served all of us extraordinarily well over the years. And we need to remember that before we start punching each other in the nose.
Now, coming out of the strike, you made a big decision, obviously, in the direction of baseball operations. Tom Grieve had been the general manager for 10 years, was over the regime when a lot of those young players, came up through the system. But you made a change in the general manager with Doug Melvin, and then Doug made a very quick change in the manager, hiring Johnny Oates. What was behind that? And obviously it worked out very well. What was behind your mindset on that?
Well, it was the hardest decision I ever made with the Rangers. And I love Tom Grieve, and Tom Grieve is a great friend of mine to this day. And we just had to make a change. At some point in time, you just have to make a change if somebody hasn't won. And we did that. Now, strangely enough, we were in first place when play was suspended, but we were 10 games under 500.
Yes, we were.
And people forget that. And you can't really, even if you'd have won a division 10 games under 500, that's probably not a very good team. And so we did that. And with Tom Grieve, because all of us really liked Tom Grieve, George Bush and Rusty Rose, myself, all of the partners, because he's such a great guy. And so when we let him go, I said to him, we really have a great affection for you. This is hard. We'd like for you to stay with the franchise. And I suggested to him maybe that he might want to do player development. And this is Tom Grieve. I mean, no, I can't imagine anybody else answering that way. He said, well, that wouldn't be fair to the guy you hire as the general manager, because the general manager has got to have, everybody's got to report to him, and there's got to be no doubt of who's in charge. And he said, that just wouldn't be fair to him. And I said, well, is there anything else that you might do? And he said, well, I kind of always thought I might like to do television and do the games on television. I said, great. And the guy that was running the affairs for the games, the TV stations, I talked to him about it, and he said, "Oh, it'll never work, and you got to have 3 guys in the booth. It will never work, and that's a terrible idea, and we don't want to do it." I said, "Look, we're going to pay the guy next year. He's not going to charge you. It's not going to cost you $1 more for him to be on, and I think he's really good, because I had watched a lot of games with him when my son was small. Suzanne and my son would stay home during school nights and stuff, and I would watch the games with Tom, and it was like going to an art museum with the painter explaining what he was doing and all that. And I knew he could really do it, and he wound up being on television. Played in the major leagues, and everybody loved him. He was a great color guy. And just a treasure for the whole franchise.
He's been a treasure for the franchise for 50 plus years. So
yeah, pretty good record there.
Yeah.
Dave Burchett used to get on me for being the one that fired him, and I said, "Look, I hired him more often than I fired him. I should get some credit for that."
Well, what about Doug and Johnny
they brought a fresh outlook to it. And, we had told Kevin Kennedy that it was going to be the general manager's decisions of whether you stay on, but we had no objection to him staying on. But Doug wanted to bring Johnny, and that, I think, was an extraordinary plus for us, because Johnny was, I think, a great manager. He also was a manager that needed to have players with him. And I'm not talking about players that are skillful baseball players. I mean, they just need to be better people. And he could really manage those kind of guys. And we started having, after the strike, we decided that we had to just have people who wanted to play for the Rangers. If they didn't want to play for the Rangers, we moved them on. And Johnny was all into that. And they were good teams. And the 96 team was I think the epitome of it.
Yeah, it was a good team. Evan, go ahead.
No, I recall a conversation with you and Rusty Rose from a long ago Dallas Morning News Texas Rangers lunch, when these things were very friendly and cordial, in which one of those players was discussed, and I'll not mention him. And Rusty just said, "Yeah, he didn't want to be here. We needed to move on from him." And he ended up having a very long career still, and a very successful career. But you guys won 3 division titles in 4 years. So
yeah. And I don't want to mention his name because he was younger then, but it was a little difficult. And we just decided life is too short, and we moved him on. And he was a great player, and he was a great player somewhere else. And we didn't worry about that, but it just didn't fit into what we were trying to do. And I think that's still a big thing that you have to do. You have to have players that want to be where they are to have a team that performs at its best.
Absolutely.
When did you think that 1996 team had a chance at competing? 95, we were right over 500. Again, it was a kind of a truncated season with a late start and everything. but that 96 team won its first 7 games. It swept the Red Sox at home, managed by Kevin Kennedy. I'll never forget Chuck Morgan played Fly Me to the Moon after we've won the final game to sweep the series, and Kennedy kind of tipped his hat up to the press box because that was his song.
Yeah.
And they started 13-4, but when did you think that team really had a chance?
Well, it was really in that first run. Because, you get off to a good start and you think you're going to be in the World Series, and that doesn't always happen, as we knew. But we led from day one all the way through the season. And but the toughest part was going to Seattle because we had a 4-game set with Seattle. And I think basically all we had to do was win one game or two.
One game.
And that was going to be the end of it, And we went, and so I got Sandy Johnson and a bunch of guys that had been.
Tom Grieve went on that trip too. I remember it was like a go right.
And, we had a bunch of scouts, and because we wanted to have them all there to feel the excitement of the first time, and all that. So the first game, we lost the first game. We decided all to walk back to the hotel, and because we were going to talk about how we're going to win the next game or whatever, And so the second game, we lost the second game, and it was a little more nerve-wracking on the walk back. And then the third game, we dropped that one too, and we walked back, and nobody said anything to anybody else in the whole walk back up, because you just knew you were going to lose the fourth game, and we did. We were right there, and then we go to California to the Los Angeles to the Angels. Then we lose the first game.
In heartbreaking fashion on a walk-off by Garrett, double by Garrett Anderson after we'd had the lead. It was crushing.
Yeah. So I went back to the hotel. Suzanne was with me, and Nancy McCusker called. And Nancy was the head of
retail
for the Rangers, and she calls me. And we had ordered West Division champion T-shirts from her, but we kept putting off the order because we kept losing. And Nancy said to me, she said, well, the guy I called him, and he said, this is it. You either got to order it today or they can't get it to you, because we had another home series before the end of the season. Yep. And I said, well, how much is the minimum order? She said, 300,000. I said, well, tell him we'll buy him, and because John Burkett is going to pitch tomorrow and he's going to win. And that's the largest wager I've ever made in my life.
Yeah, and then Berkey won, and then Ken Hill won, and then we get to that to the clinching day on September 27th, and the Rangers, in true franchise tradition, couldn't even clinch right.
But the ballpark, we had designed the ballpark so that the scoreboard would be manually controlled.
Right.
This very moment, where the guys out there jiggling it up and down, and it posted where they had lost. And so the crowd just erupts, and all that kind of stuff. But
we play 15 innings, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and but the fans stayed. I mean, it was amazing when we finally did win, and the team went out on the field. It was one of the greatest moments I've ever felt.
Well, and going into the clubhouse afterwards, I mean, it was unbelievable. I still have the jersey that I wore and got soaked with champagne and all that kind of stuff. But what a moment. And it was just a baseball moment, and those guys were so happy, and we were so happy, and the fans were so happy. And I mean, it was incredible. Just incredible.
So three division titles in 4 years. We couldn't get by the New York Yankees. And, Rangers win that first game in New York. I believe you had the nuns, the Sister Francis and Sister Maggie at Yankee Stadium for good luck. John Burkett pitches a complete game, and we just couldn't score for 3 straight postseasons against a great team. I mean, we did run into a buzzsaw.
It was a great team, and the thing, there's a great story about that first, because we won the first game in New York, and the second game we were ahead, and we wound up losing in extra innings. But the thing that happened that I always remember is George Steinbrenner, because that was a 2-2-1 series way you had to do it. And we were ahead at, I think it was in the 8th inning or something like that. It was pretty late in the game. But George gave the tips to all the people that waited for the year. It was the last game, and he said, because it's over, we'll never come back to New York. They'll never come back to New York. So he paid everybody off, and then they win.
Well, they didn't come back to New York for that series because we lost both games at home. So
absolutely.
But even, I mean, the hunt for Red October, the red. It was so special that first time.
No question about it. And it's not baseball if it can't break your heart. And boy, it broke our hearts when we lost that last game and it was over with. It was just like the fairy tale had ended. But it'll always be remembered, I think.
Exactly.
I'm just flashing back now because I obviously wasn't here in '94 or '96, and it did feel, in retrospect, it did feel like you guys created an entirely new franchise with the birth of that stadium, the change of the logo and the uniforms. And you did, I think.
Sold a lot of red hats and jerseys, Evan.
Yeah,
still wearing that red.
All around I think people all around the country finally started to notice the Texas Rangers, and it was a completely different organization. And really, we can talk about the club coming in '72, and certainly there were chapters in the club's history in those first 20 years. But it really does feel like the history of the Texas Rangers began in 1994 with the opening of the stadium, the change of the branding, and your ownership group really taking a prominent place. And listen, Tom, I only got to deal with you on a day-to-day basis for a little bit more than 2 years, and I'm glad that we've been able to keep up a relationship for as long as we have. But I did always think that you had this approach to ownership, and maybe it was because you were a partner and not the majority owner, but there was this general stewardship mandate that you ran a franchise and you were going to operate it in some way like a business, but it wasn't primarily a business. It was something that represented the area. And I just look at the landscape of owners now. We've seen a lot of different guys come through the Dallas-Fort Worth community. Mark Cuban built an amazing fan base with his Mavs fan base. Jerry's a character all to his own. I just wonder if you have advice for ownership today about what the mission of sports ownership should be.
Rusty Rose, when we sold it, and we had a lot of partners, and they were baseball fans, and we didn't have any internal problems with the partnership and all that kind of stuff. But Rusty, who never liked to say anything in public, and I'm the one who always did the talking and all that kind of stuff. But when we sold the team, he got up and he said, owning a baseball team is like you never. He said, he said, you never own a baseball team. All you can be is a good steward for it and pass it on to the next people better than you found it. And I think we did that. But I think it is a stewardship, and it is a relationship that you have with the fans. And you don't ever want to forget the people that pay the money that come. And the thing that you realize when you are involved with a franchise is it means so much to so many people, particularly people that are disabled or that can't do things because they follow it on a day-to-day basis, and it's the best thing that happens in their lives. And when you see people invest that kind of emotion in it, you want to do well, and you want to treat them well, and you want to treat other people in the franchise well. And I'm very proud of the fact that we had a franchise that took into account people's lives that worked there, and people enjoyed working there. And I really that still warms my heart to think that they did that. And it's a special thing to do, and you should be mindful that it's special, and you should be grateful for the opportunity when you get it.
Yeah, I may have told you this story too, right? I always feel like I became a sports fan out of civic pride. I grew up in Atlanta. We were the only city in the South at that point in time that had pro sports franchises. Said Atlanta across the chest, right? That was a symbol of pride, and so it felt more like a municipal asset or foundation than it did a business. And maybe as we grow older, we learn the real world, but I've always appreciated the fact that you guys operated this franchise as a way, as an extension of the community.
Thank you. That's what we wanted it to be, and that's what I hope it will always be.
And one thing that I think that doesn't get recognized all the time is that your ownership group also started our charitable side. We started the foundation the Texas Rangers Foundation in 1992, and that has gone on to do wonderful work over the last 30 plus years. But that's kind of an extension of what you're talking about, being a steward and being so connected to a community.
Yeah, and Norm Lyons was largely responsible for all of that. But Norm was a great friend of mine, and I brought him into the franchise to do that. And it made a lot of difference in a lot of lives. And you can't ever get away from that. You have to remember that people want you to do things like that because they want you to be a responsible member of the community. And that's really important. And that's always important for the players to participate in that too. And I think at the end, when we sold the franchise, I think there were 85 different entities within the foundation that were doing something, particularly for young people. And it made a difference. And when you went to the ballpark and you saw people enjoying it, it just made you feel good.
Yeah.
So Tom, last question for me. Last question for me is this. You, after baseball, you obviously had a very distinguished career in diplomacy. But I just wonder, did you have any conversations with President Bush? Did you say, look, if you're going to give me an ambassadorship, there better be baseball there? Because both of the places you went to have pretty good baseball communities.
They do, but I don't think that was why I was there. When you have a chance to stand up, and 9/11 had happened, and there was a memorial service, and I was at 9/11 with Prime Minister Howard and all that kind of stuff. But then they had a memorial service, and the Prime Minister asked me to speak, and I was up there. And when you're standing before 4,000 people and wall-to-wall television in Australia, and you realize at that point in time you're the face of America, it's a pretty humbling experience. And of all the things that I've done in my life and the careers that I've had, there's nothing like the fulfillment that I received from being a representative of the United States. And President Bush was very kind about that, but our friendship deepened over more serious issues than baseball. And that's something I'll always be grateful for to him, and just grateful to people for allowing me to serve the country.
Well, it's a connection that those of us that had the opportunity to be here through all of that, it's still a treasure that you and President Bush still comes to the ballpark, but it's a connection that the Rangers will always have. It will always be part of our history, and the ownership group. It changed things and really led to the first postseason appearance in club history. So, Tom, we appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us. And Tom was also, I forgot to mention, he's a 2014 inductee into the Rangers Hall of Fame, and very well deserved. So, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure to be here again, believe me.
Well, Evan, that was a fascinating conversation with Tom Schieffer, who's always very articulate and has had a great career. But I think the last question you asked him about what an owner is and being a steward of a franchise, that ownership group really did that to a T.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a great lesson for ownership in all sports today. Is, you know, your values are going to go up. You're probably going to make money year over year as well, but there is a responsibility to the community to not just try and put a winner on the field, but to be a member of that community.
And I didn't really want to bring this up to Tom, but I always contend that George W. Bush, the ownership of the Rangers, really did kind of propel him into tech recognition statewide. Yes, his father was the current president of the United States when he bought the team, but President Bush at that time, the future President Bush, made appearances all over the state of Texas selling Rangers baseball. He got a name recognition all over the state. That really helped him in the governor's race, obviously, running against a very popular Democratic incumbent, Nan Richards, in 1994. And that kind of propelled him into the White House for 8 years. And, it's a fascinating story, like I was saying, having that connection with a former president. But it really did increase his recognition around the state.
100%. And one thing I really do admire, and this is, we're getting off the Tom Schieffer perspective, is President Bush does come to games. He's come to at least 3 or 4 already this year. And so you understand that the love of baseball endures for him.
Yes.
This wasn't just a business proposition for him. The love of the game is something that endures. And it's not just because he said to me in the hallway this year that I'm really kicking some ass out there, but he is a baseball fan. He reads baseball. He loves baseball, and that just adds another layer of what his ownership group was about.
And you can extend that to Tom Schieffer. He was such a passionate fan. The work he put in behind the scenes to build the ballpark in Arlington, he visited like all these ballparks and did so as a fan. What did a fan want in that ballpark? Yes, he was looking for revenue streams and everything else, but it was all about the fans. And that's why that ownership group, I think, really did resonate here in Arlington. And it brought them the first postseason appearance in club history 30 years ago. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. I'm John Blake, and you can follow us as always. And Evan, you want to wrap it up for us this week?
What's there to wrap up, John? You've stolen all of my lines this week. Run away with everything. So until next week, we'll see you then.